Hello, everyone. Welcome to another presentation in our FADS series. And FADS stands for Facilitating Academic Discourse Strategies. We are so glad to have you here today. Today, your presenters are all members from the NCDPI L support team, and they are Christian Walter, Carolyn Fry, and Reve Bostwick, and that is me. And we'd like to also say a quick thank you to our NCDPI Title III consultants that are always there behind the scenes to help us out. So we appreciate their support again today. And also our section chief, Christy Day. We also appreciate her as well. So today we are going to talk about facilitating academic discourse strategies for all is the title of our presentation. And that's just because we are going to give you some examples from all different content areas, as many as we could fit in an hour. And we are showing you examples from different grade levels as well. Now, these strategies are going to be different than the ones that you will see for some of our other FADS trainings. So if you sign up for this one today and also want to sign up for some others that we have available, you will get access to different strategies than you see here today. If you happen to need to contact us, here's our contact information. And all of the slides and the links we will use today are available in the link in the handouts. So in your control panel, you can see that there is a link to handouts. You should have two of them. And then also, if you look at the top of the screen, not at this one, but on every other slide, you can see it visible in the top right-hand corner. There's a bit.ly link that gives you access to all of the links we will use today, as well as the presentation. If you happen to have audio difficulties, please look in the chat box for some directions on how to help you manage the audio difficulties. And then also too, if you need to raise your hand for any reason to ask a question or to be unmuted, then there is a hand icon that you can click on to let us know that you need some assistance or that you would like to respond. In the bottom of the control panel, you can see the question/chat box. That is visible to presenters only. So we can respond to you in that way, but it will not be visible to other participants. Just wanted you to be aware of that. So we have a few poll questions for you here right at the beginning. Take a quick look at this map to see where your county is located. These are the 8 different regions that North Carolina is divided into based on the North Carolina State Board of Education districts. So check for yours. 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now we would like to know where you're joining us from. So I'm going to launch the poll, and I would like you to please answer that question. We need just a few more of you to participate before I can close out this poll. 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to close it out. And here are the results. So this has been typical. More of our participants come from the Piedmont Triad area than other areas in the Southwest, but there's equal distribution pretty much throughout the other areas. All right, let's go on to the next one. Our next poll question is, what is your position? I am going to click on that poll. All right, it should be launched now for you to see it on your screen. Are you a content area teacher, ESL teacher, a lead teacher, administrator, or other, something that maybe we don't have listed? And you do have to click on your choice and then click submit, and then it will get your vote registered. Okay, I'm going to close that one out. And then I'll share the results with you. We do have just a little tiny bit over half as ESL teachers, but we have some others who are content area teachers or administrators or something other that we don't have listed. Our next question is, what subject do you teach? So many of you said that you are ESL teachers, so that will probably come up here, but if you're a content area teacher or other, do any of these apply to you? Math or science, ELA, social studies or arts, or other again? Okay, get a couple more people to participate. All right, I'm going to close that out. And here are the results. We've now got about 61% teaching ESL or dual language. And then the others, we've got a few with math and science, ELA, social studies. Thank you for joining us with social studies and arts and other. Okay, we have one more question. And then we'll get to jump into the strategies. So the last question here is just curious as to whether or not you've attended any of our others FADS presentations. Okay, I'm going to get ready to close that one out. Okay, I'm going to share the results with you just quickly here. So about 39% said yes and 55% no, 7% not really sure. So we did change up a little bit the beginning of this so that those of you who did attend another one of our presentations don't hear all the same at the beginning. So we did change it up just a little bit. Thank you so much for participating in those polls. So our agenda today is we are going to discuss academic discourse very briefly, and then we'll get into presentation and practice of 3 different strategies. Now at the end, you will be given a survey once you close out, but please do make sure that you look at the follow-up email that you get from now it might go in your junk folder or your spam folder, but you will automatically receive a certificate in email. So please check your email for that certificate that you get. It has your name on it and it has, well, I think it might have your name on it, but it will give you your 1 hour credit of attending. So that's so simple and easy to be able to turn into your district.
Thank you, Reviv. We're going to get started today, and thank you for being here today. I'm going to start talking a little bit about academic language today. All of you who are participants today are educators, and we all know that classroom instruction is supposed to be centered around a task. As an administrator myself, when I walk into a class where there is instruction taking place, I always look for students to be engaged in a task. That task is supposed to be aligned, of course, to state standards. And that is where academic language emerges. Standards, we all know, comprise a great deal of academic language and skills the students are going to be supposed to grasp. What we see here on this slide are some of the factors or variables that academic discourse takes into consideration. For example, I'm just going to name a few: voice and register, clarity and coherence, purpose, function, audience. On the other hand, I just wanted to mention that when I think about academic language, the authors of the SIAP model have done an extensive work and they come to my mind. SIAP, as you probably know, stands for Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, and authors Short and Echeverria released a book a couple of years ago called Developing Academic Language, which of course focuses its attention on academic language. They define academic language proficiency. I don't have the quote in front of myself, but something along the lines that refers to the ability to use academic language for various purposes and with different audiences in individual subject areas. In other words, when students are proficient in academic language, they can use the knowledge of language to learn new information, to demonstrate knowledge of information, apply information, form opinions, and perform academic tasks. Let's go on to the next slide, Rebe. So this is some food for thought, just for you to think about today in the reality that we're going through, that we're just living. If each student in a 30-person class gets to answer a teacher's question only once per period, that made that up to only 1 to 2 minutes per day of speaking academic language. And that is supposed to be taking place in a classroom where we have opportunities to get into interactions with students. But just think about what's taking place today when students are working from home. Depending on how remote learning is being conducted, students may or may not have opportunities to speak or listen to English while they are away from school. On the other hand, this raises the idea of the significance for teachers to incorporate interaction into their instruction. We all know that students gain understanding by assimilating information gained through discussions and application of new knowledge and making connections to previously learned knowledge. Often when we call on students during a typical class, we only give them chances to respond with short answers and not even full sentences. For example, when we do popcorn questioning and we just call a couple of students, and sometimes we have those students that love to raise their hands because they love to answer all their questions. I'm sure you probably have a picture of who I'm talking about now as I describe this, but that's what happens. So we need to make sure we give students ample opportunities for them to use the language. And as I say this, I'm also thinking again about the SIOP model. If you're familiar with SIOP, you all know that SIOP has different components and features, and one of the components is called interaction, which speaks to the significance of giving students opportunities for them to use the language. I can't remember, if I'm not mistaken, we have a slide that says use it or lose it. That speaks to the fact that if you do not use the language, the academic language, you lose it. Let's move on to the next slide, Revere. So as we talk about interaction and the significance of academic discourse, it goes without saying that we will have to be very strategic when it comes to content delivery. And that's going to entail, as we have it here on the slide, explicit preparation, especially when you're working on lesson plans, making sure that you are incorporating, finding ways and systems in which you're going to deliver that academic language and giving students opportunity for academic language use. Scaffolded support, that refers to providing students with the use of sentence frames, language frames. Research and studies have shown that students that are exposed to the use of language frames get to experience more success because sentence frames enhance academic language use and foster the knowledge of academic language. Also providing students with clear expectations to how to participate. And I would probably include modeling without those clear expectations. I mean, how are you going to give students clear expectations if you want to make sure students know what is expected from them? You want to make sure that you model and provide oral language practice, as we said before. That is very, very, very important. As I think about my days when I was in the classroom, I would probably, as a teacher, of course, I would also include explicit teaching and teaching students the significance of code switching, which can have some implications with what we were talking about, academic language. More often than not, our students are unable to distinguish the way we use language. It's going to depend on the circumstances that we're going through or the place. And students need to know that schools are, or school is the place of business, and that's where academic language is going to be used. The way I talk to a teacher, the way I talk to a student in the classroom is going to be different from the way I talk to family members at home. So highlighting the significance of code switch, I think, is also very important. If we go to the next slide, Reve. Here we have some instructional tools, I should say digital tools that we can use during these times of remote learning. Some of them teachers have become in the last couple of weeks really proficient with the use of them. And I would like Reve to push our participants thinking now to see how they could foster academic language, which tools could they use. So participants, if you can get to the question box and just enter your response, the question would be, in addition to these digital tools that you see here, we have Seesaw, we have Canvas, Zoom, Flipgrid, Padlet, Google Classrooms. What are others tools, digital tools that you can use to promote the use of academic language? We're going to get back to the question box unless you have some responses now, Reve. Do we have some responses on the chat box?
I see just a couple. They're starting to come in. We have Kahoot, Quizzes, Edpuzzle, Vocabulary, GoFormative,
Mm-hmm.
using Loom, which is a recording application,
Yes.
Quizlet, WhatsApp, TED-Ed, ReadWorks, ClassDojo, WordWall. Those are some of the items that have come in.
Thank you so much. I wanted to talk a little bit about Canvas because that's the one that our district uses here, and that you can actually do. Canvas is a platform through which you can do web conferencing with your students. So basically, you can plan web conferencing sessions, and you can find ways to incorporate some of the strategies to foster academic language use using sentence frames through Canvas. In addition to the ones that we have here on the screen and the ones that the audience was sharing with us. So we're going to move on to the next slide, Reve. And we just remind our participants that if they have any questions, just make sure you use the question box to input any question that you may have or any idea that you want to share with the rest of the audience. Our first strategy today is called Anticipation Guide. And I would like to ask participants, what word comes to your mind when you think about the word anticipation? Again, I repeat, what word comes to your mind when you think about the word anticipation, and use the question box to enter your response. And as you do that on the other side of the screen, I'm going to ask Reve just to share with me what comes to your mind, Reve, when you think about the word anticipation.
Well, when I think of that, I think of what I'm looking forward to. I know that something exciting is coming.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I have the same thoughts when I think about this word. Do we have any responses from participants in the chat box?
They are very similar. I see a few other words like predict, expect, be prepared, eagerly waiting, the future.
Okay, and I'm sure many of our participants are probably familiar with this strategy. I always think that since we are we're going through this time of so much learning for teachers because we have to adjust to new times in such a short period of time and learn about so many new platforms that that results sometimes into cognitive overload. So it's always worth revisiting some of these strategies. And you're going to see that they can be also used through distance learning. But getting back to anticipation guides, it's basically a before reading strategy used to start students thinking about what they know or think they know about a topic. They're usually used in literature to predict what will happen or before or after reading a passage. And I remember, for example, when I was an ESL teacher, I would use anticipation guides quite frequently with my students because they found them really entertaining and they were fun. And the good thing about anticipation guides is that they do not have a definite answer. So this gives to the possibility of having an array of different responses. And the purpose is to activate students' background knowledge as well as to, if you want, introduce some type of key vocabulary. So let's look at some of the features that are listed here on the slide. You're going to use 3 to 5 statements that require students to reflect and think about themes and concepts that they will encounter in the lesson. The sentences should capture students' interest. In other words, the sentences have to be somehow thought-provoking, in my opinion, and that's going to be crucial because that's going to determine whether you're going to be able to catch the student's interest, right? Moreover, the sentences should provide a mixture of agreement and disagreement statements, and statements should be neither too narrow nor too broad. Can we go on to the next slide, Raven? So what we see here, these are some procedures that we're going to put in place whenever we use an anticipation guide. The first time the students encounter an anticipation guide, you want to make sure that you're going to model how to read and respond to the statements. As with any new strategy, you want to make sure you spend sufficient time modeling the strategy because that's going to determine the success that you are going to have as a teacher and the students with the strategy. The students should be given 2 minutes to read each statement and individually respond agree or disagree by checking the corresponding column. It is also important to stick to the time that you initially give to the students, and the focus should be on the discussion piece, okay? Students, on the other hand, should provide a brief reason for their answers. Do not allow students to write like detailed responses. As we said before, the focus is on the discussion, not the writing. We also have that they're going to be able to share their thoughts and reasons, and everyone in the group must share ideas before moving to the next statement. So we're going to try to model with Rebe, but before going to the next slide, let me remind participants that you're also going to give students sentence frames because we want to make sure that students are successful in the way they're going to use the academic language. So especially for those students who are at early levels of English proficiency, you want to make sure you add those sentence frames there. And that's what you're going to see in the next slide. So let's go to the next slide. And so in this particular slide, Reve and myself are going to be just modeling how to use the anticipation guide. What you see here, we have 2 statements that correspond to 2 different subjects. And we're just doing this to give you an idea what statements would look like in different subjects. But usually when you do an anticipation guide, statements should revolve around the same topic. So Reve, are you ready to model with me?
Yes.
So I'm going to give you, Reve, a minute for you to go on your own for 30 seconds. Just go through the statements and read the statements on your own and fill in the blanks. And then we're going to do the modeling. And you're going to be student 1 and I'm going to be student 2. How about that?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
So I will
So you
read
want to go?
statement 1, and it says, dinosaurs are the most successful group of land animals to ever roam the earth. I think I'll agree with that because dinosaurs were around for a long time. So I'm going to mark agree. What do you think?
I agree with you because dinosaurs lived close to 60 million years on Earth. So that's why I marked agree. So for statement one, I will mark agree. Now let me read statement two. It says, mushrooms are healthy and delicious. I agree because when you cook them, they taste really good and they give you a lot of nutrients.
Okay. I disagree because I do think they probably are healthy, but I don't really like them. I don't think they're delicious. So I'm going to put disagree.
Well, thank you so much, Reba. You did a great job.
Ooh. And just as a
So,
quick reminder before we go to the
yes,
next one is that as you notice that these are not answers that we could look up somewhere and say, yes, it does say in this book that it is a fact that mushrooms are delicious. Some of these will not be able to be proven by the end of your lesson, so they're just a little bit different than maybe the anticipation guides you all are used to seeing, but they do facilitate discussion around the topic that will be presented after this anticipation guide.
absolutely. And also notice how students are using, are learning about ways to express agreement, ways to express disagreement, and all that language that is so important for them to communicate. So let's go to the next slide. And this one is gonna, this is the one where participants are gonna be practicing. And we're gonna follow the same procedure that we did with the previous one. And here we have different statements, as you can see. We have an example for ELA, math, science, and social studies. Just as a reminder, we would typically include 3 to 5 statements, but related to the same topic to introduce a new lesson. We're doing this just to give you an idea of what statements would look like in different subjects. And also, as another reminder, make sure those statements are thought-provoking and they are somehow controversial just to spark some interest in your students. This is what we're going to do next. We're going to spend like 1 minute just for you to go through the statements and just work from the other side of the computer. Just mark agree, disagree, and come up with a reason. And then once we're done with that, we're going to ask for 2 volunteers. One of our volunteers is going to be student number 1, and the other volunteer is going to be student number 2. You're going to have to raise your hand, and in order to do that, you have to go uh, to the control panel where you see the hand, raise your hand, and once you raise your hand, we're going to just unmute you, and we're going to do this live on the air, okay? So we just have 1 minute to go through the statements. And if you want to participate, make sure you raise your hand. We need 1 volunteer for student number 1 and 1 volunteer for student number 2. And as I wait for you guys to go through the statements, this is something that you can even use as you do a web conferencing through Canvas with your students or any of the other digital tools that we've been talking about. If you have a live conferencing feature, you can put this an anticipation guide similar to the one we're showing with the sentence frames, and you can have your students use the sentence frames and practice the language live through the web conferencing. Do we have,
Okay.
Rebe, do we have, so we need 2 volunteers. Do we have 2 volunteers?
Well, yes, we do. I'm going to unmute, I believe it's Tennille and Elena. So get ready. I'm going to unmute both of you. And you should be able to unmute yourself on your end.
Uh, it says we should always tell the truth no matter what. And
Okay.
I disagree with it because in some cases, as if you implied to break confidentiality, if you're a counselor, you cannot do that. So you
Okay.
cannot always tell.
Can I jump in for a second? What's your name?
Elena,
Elena, can we use, you're going to be student one, okay? So can we
okay.
use the sentence frame for student one? And just give me a second. Let's introduce your partner. Who is your partner?
Tennille.
Tanil. Hey, Tanil, how are you?
Good. Thank you. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. So Tanib, you're gonna be student number two, okay?
Okay.
So we're gonna start over. It's okay. So Elena is gonna start with make sure you focus your attention on the sentence frames because that's what we want our students to use,
Mhm.
okay, Elena? And then
Okay.
once Elena is done with her sentence frame part, Tanib, you're gonna jump in with your part, okay? Any
Okay.
questions? Are we good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, let's go.
I will read statement one. We should always tell the truth no matter what. I disagree with it because sometimes that implies to break confidentiality. So I'm going to mark it disagree. What do you think?
I agree with you because um, the sometimes people want to know how they look in a certain outfit, and you don't want to tell them, so you wouldn't want to tell the truth no matter what. So for statement one, I will mark disagree. Now let me read statement two. It says half of something is better than nothing. I agree because I would rather have half of a candy bar than no candy bar.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, you did a great job. Thank you very much for being our volunteers today. Okay. You can go ahead and mute yourself. Uh, do we have time, Rebecca, for two more volunteers for the next two statements?
We might want to go on to the next one.
To the next slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Next, yes, unless you've got others you want to talk about on this one.
No, that's fine. Okay. So, but I think that participants were able to capture the 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 way you do this activity and some of the uses as well, the significance of making sure that students use the sentence frames just to promote academic language use. Let's go on to the next one. So here, we're just gonna push your thinking. We explained it, you experienced it just a couple of seconds ago. Now, let's explore how you can use the anticipation guide in your content area. And in order to do this, we're going to go to a Padlet and we're going to type in some ideas of how you might be able to incorporate the anticipation guide strategy into your instruction, either in the classroom or in this remote learning setting that we're just going through right now. So we have a link to the Padlet that it's in the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen usually. So if you can click there, you're going to have three columns. Either one of the columns, you can go to either one of the columns. You click on the plus sign, and that's going to open a box. And in that box, you're going to start typing different uses of the anticipation guide strategy. So we're just we have some participants here that are saying for interaction during math classes, assess speaking and listening skills, um, to gauge knowledge of the new content throughout a lesson, to foster speaking skills, to introduce a theme, to introduce a new novel or story, to get students involved. I think that that works really well, especially when you think about coming up with catchy statements that are going to get students' attention. To activate prior knowledge, absolutely. To get students involved in a class, the ones who don't usually talk, to learn about what students already know, to access prior knowledge again. So these are some of the different uses that we can give to anticipation guides. And remember that this is a strategy that works really well in the classroom, but also through distance learning. We can be creative and find ways to incorporate this strategy throughout your distance learning, remote learning. So I'm going to turn it over now to Rebecca, who's going to continue with the remaining strategies.
Great, thank you so much. And I did just check the question box and there were no questions, so I'm going to go on. But if you do think of any questions about this strategy that was just presented, please feel free to put those in the question box and we'll catch those here in just a couple more minutes. So our next strategy that we will talk about is 4 corners. And many of you have used 4 corners in your classrooms already. And if we were doing this live, I'd probably ask for a show of hands of how many people have done this. And I'm sure most of you would probably raise your hands. But what we're going to do today is look at this strategy in a slightly different way, in that we want to make sure that these 4 corners are utilized as small grouping discussion facilitation devices, so to speak. We don't want them just to go to a corner to indicate their answered choice, for example. We want them to go to the corner to allow for a smaller group for those students to be able to interact more freely. And you could utilize this in a way such as I've shown on the screen here. I've got some different mathematical symbols, and maybe I read a math problem and ask students which one of these mathematical operations would be necessary to solve the problem. And you could have students go to those 4 corners and discuss why. Or you could utilize this in a slightly different way by having them be divided up into equal groups at each of the 4 corners and have them list up as many academic vocabulary words as they can that are associated with that mathematical symbol. So I could ask them, if they go to the plus sign, okay, have each student write down on a poster all of the words that they can think of in their collective group that are associated with addition. Right there, addition would be one of the words that they would write. I often have students use different colored markers and tell them that each student must write something on that. If it's a poster board, then each student must write something on the poster, just to make sure that all students are participating. Now you can easily help your newcomers join in this activity by allowing them to work together with the other people in their groups. Those other people in the groups can help that newcomer student figure out what word he or she would like to add. And if the student is only capable of doing it in his original native language and not yet in English, that's fine. If we need to do that, we can then help scaffold that knowledge up to learning English in addition to the language they already know, or languages they already know. Another way you could do this is you could have an event, for example, our pandemic that we are experiencing right now, and you could ask students to, you could either pre-divide students equally amongst all of the groups, or you could ask them to go to the corner which determines the biggest impact they feel that the current pandemic or any event, for example, has had on society. You could have them divide either way. But once in those groups, the important thing to remember is we want the academic discussion to not end with them walking to the poster. once at the poster, they still need to have those facilitated discussions. If your students need sentence frames, and if they need visuals that are labeled to help them do that, it's definitely okay to provide those for your students to help them facilitate even more discussion around that topic. Once they finish at the first poster, we like to have them rotate to the next poster and have additional discussions. Have them add on to what the first group added. You would be surprised at how deep and how much deeper understanding our students have of content knowledge and academic discourse just by going to another poster, looking to see what's there, and then trying to dig deeper. And once they've rotated down to all through the 4 different posters, then of course you could have a debriefing of the activity. But it's very interesting and powerful for our students to see what other people are thinking as they rotate with their group, but then also from one group to another group. It provides different perspectives, and it's very low preparation on the teacher part. The teacher has to prepare the posters and the theme, and then students do the rest of the work. Isn't that great? Teachers need a little bit of a break, right? Let the students do the heavy lifting on this one. You can use this as a strategy to do before you teach the unit to see what kind of prior knowledge they come with. You can use it as a formative assessment in the middle of your unit or topic, or you could do it as a summary activity to see how much your students have learned. Now, some of you might think, well, I have a small group. How can I do this with just 6 students? You could just choose to do one poster. And today's poster is the yellow one, for example. Tomorrow's poster could be the blue one. So you can choose to just do a single poster per day rather than all 4 at one time. Or you could do it virtually, as we were going to look at here in just a moment. So what we'll do here when we do our participation experience is you will be linked to some Google Docs. And what we would like you to do is in the academic vocabulary column that you see, list some words that you think of that come to mind when you see the image that is at the top of the screen. So for example, if I were to give you the poster that had the X on it and have you come up with academic words that come to mind when you see the symbol, some of them that we might see are listed there in the academic vocabulary column. If you are in the presentation and in present mode, you can click on the box that corresponds to your last name. If you are in the FADS for All links document, it is specified by your last name which Google Doc to click on. If you could click on the one that corresponds to your last name, you will see, for example, if your last name starts with A through G, you will click on the English Language Arts one. All you'll do is, if you are in that document, just type in some academic vocabulary words that come to mind when you see that image. Same with the other ones as well. So if right now, if you all could work on the experience portion, this is one way you could do this digitally now with your students, or even in the future. But take a moment to go to those Google Docs and start typing in the academic vocabulary that comes to mind when you see those. So if you're in the last part of the alphabet, yours is social studies. Science is in the middle there. If you need more rows, you are welcome to add more rows to the bottom. If you've written one word and you don't see others typing, you can definitely add in more. So like in the math, we've got analog, minute, elapsed time. Great. Intervals. We can even go on to skip counting, counting by fives, etc. So I can see how we could easily utilize this type of strategy now in our remote learning environment. And you could even do this in the future as well by using images rather than even certain words, like in some of the ones I had, social impact, etc. Those were words, but you can use images as well. I'm going to just quickly check the question box to see if there were questions. If you could all look at the slide, I'm going to go back to the main presentation. Let me do in the present mode, sorry, just one moment. At the top of the screen, if that link should work for everyone, that says the bit.ly FADS for all, and it is case sensitive. That takes you to the list of all the links that we're using today. Okay, I'm going to go on to see how you think you might be able to utilize this strategy. So if you'll click on the Padlet link, it's the same exact Padlet that we were using previously. How do you think we might be able to utilize this in our classrooms? I'm going to jump into the Padlet quickly to see what kind of awesome ideas you have. You have to maybe scroll over, use the bottom scroll bar to get to the middle where we've got our four corners applications. So we have people saying that we could use this for elements of a fairy tale, inferences and evidences. And if anyone else does not know how to use these Padlet columns, there's a very small scroll bar next to each individual column, and that helps you scroll down to see what other people have put. I like this to check vocabulary complexity. If students are only putting in very basic words, you need to scaffold up to the next level and try to teach them the words that they haven't learned yet in English. Outcomes of a story, genres for literature. I like the newcomers, getting them involved as well. Pictures will definitely help to do that. And again, if you need to have supports available for your students to participate actively, you can have labeled diagrams and labeled images to be able to facilitate that better for them. Okay, we have another idea about expanding vocabulary, similarities and differences, creating a story then with the words that they produce on those posters. And I really like that idea too, because we don't want to just have them list up those words one day and then forget them the rest of the year. We want to make sure that they're using these vocabulary words and it's for a purpose, right? So all of these activities that we're doing would be not just independent activities that had no connection to anything else. You want to make sure you're using those vocabulary words over and over to give those students opportunities to really remember them. All right, thank you for adding your ideas. We have one more strategy to present, and that one is called open sort. And again, I did just look in the question box and I did not see any new questions there. But again, if you do have questions, please make sure that you add them, and we're getting to them as we can. Thank you for everyone who's working to add the answers to those questions. Okay, open sort is an activity that Carolyn Fry introduced me to. I had done closed sorts before, but not an open sort in the way that she presented it to me. Some of you have done these before. And I have found when I've done closed sorts, the way I did them in the past was I would just give the students all of the cards they needed, and then they would manipulate them and put them into categories. Well, maybe, I'm not sure if you all have noticed, but I noticed that when I did that, they weren't talking. They just said maybe here, I got it, there. Not very much academic vocabulary discussions or discourse was taking place. It was mostly very, very basic vocabulary and basic commands. That was all that was being said. So when we do this open sort in the way that we'll show you here today, it just automatically presents a way that students have to talk, and they have to be a little bit more explicit with the words that they use. So I really like this activity. I'm going to show you by turning on my webcam. Give me just 1 second while I get that manipulated here. And what you're going to do is you're going to divide your students into a group. I'm sorry, the camera's coming. Okay, you're going to divide your students into groups, and then you'll give each group an envelope. Sorry, my webcam doesn't seem to be coming on. Let me try again. Okay, hang on. So each group is going to get an envelope, and they're going to be filled with the same cards. The cards are then going to be taken out one at a time, and then the students need to sort them however they see fit. What's important is you do not want to tell the students how many groups they need to have or what criteria they should utilize to sort these cards that they have in their envelopes. The important thing is that the student who has control of the envelope is the one who gets to speak. And they're the ones who get to manipulate the cards. Everyone in the group is allowed to speak. So again, anyone in the group can speak at any time, but the one who has control of the envelope is the one who gets to manipulate the categories, the cards into the different categories. So for example, I would take out a card. I'm student number 1. I'm going to take out a card, and I could say, I see my card says 3,867. It's the first card, so I'm going to put it in a category here. Now I would pass the envelope to the next person, so I no longer have control. Carolyn, are you ready to be my next student?
Yes.
All right, student Carolyn has gotten this card.
I have 23,893 in word form. So let me see your card again. I'm going to start a new category because I have word form and yours is number form.
Okay. Next, I'm going to pass the envelope now to, well, I guess Carolyn would pass the envelope to Christian. Christian would pull out a card. Christian, can you see this card? Christian may or may not be able to see this card. So I'm going to read this for Christian. It says 893. I see that this is numbers and the other category is words. So I'm going to put it here in this category with the other numbers. The envelope goes back to Reve, so that's me. I pull out the card and it says 902. I see that this is in word form. I'm going to put this in this category here because it's also in word form. Now the envelope gets passed to Carolyn. Carolyn is going to pull her card out.
I have 3,967. I'm going to put that in the first column, but I want to move the 893 to the second column because it ends in 93 and the 23,893 both end in 93. And I want to take 902 and put it in a whole new column. So we now have 3 categories.
Okay. So normally Carolyn's hands would be the one manipulating here. All right, now I'm going to pass this to Christian.
Christian told us he's not able to talk. He's talking, but we can't hear him. So maybe we can just move to the next way to do this virtually.
Yes. So what you could also do is the next person can also, once they get their card, they can change it up even a third time. So it doesn't have to stay exactly how the first person changed the categories. It could change yet a third time. So hopefully you got an idea of what that would be like. I'm going to show my screen and we're going to look at how we could do this virtually. Of course, you can do this with your students just like we did right now. Have the teacher just be the person pulling out the cards and then have each individual student decide how to group them and give a reason why. Here are some of the types of sentence frames that we used. Even though they weren't on the screen for us, you definitely could provide these for your students to have more opportunities for them to say things like category and give longer discourse rather than I think here. You know, that's not really a lot of academic discourse, right? So we do want to provide them sentence frames as much as we can. Here's another way you might be able to practice. This is a digital version. I created this one in Google Slides. And I'll show you another example in drawings as well. So I'm just going to pull some words out. I made just a stack of different words down here in the right-hand corner. You could let your students manipulate this. Currently, you all just have viewing rights rather than editing. But you could just have the teacher pull out one at a time and students tell you which category to place it in and why. Or you could have the students do it individually and let them do it. And then what adds one more layer to this academic discourse is once these all get put into categories, then you want your students to come up with a label for the category. So depending on what is all in your category, your label might change. You can do this with words. You saw the number and word version that we did just a second ago. You can do it with pictures and have students talk about landforms, for example. Or there is another example here that is with fractions and decimals. So again, these are all just piled up here in the corner. And then I was very excited to learn how to do Google Drawing. So again, you don't have to click on all of these. Let me just show it to you on the screen. They will be available for you at a future date. You have access to this, you just need to make a copy. But this is a Google Drawing. If this works out better for you, all of the objects are located off to the side of the screen, and then you can pull them over onto your screen. And it's the same as the Google slide. It just gives you maybe a little bit more working room because the drawings are off to the side. And if someone has asked about access to these slides, and it is all available at the FADS for All link that's at the top of this screen. It gives you a link to all of our Padlets and documents we use today, including the presentation is at the bottom of that link. Once students in each of the individual groups have had a chance to sort the words or pictures, number cards, whatever you have on your cards, then you would have the students do a gallery walk and do a comparison of how you their first group sorted the words or cards versus how other groups sorted them. And then you could give your students some sentence frames to utilize for that as well. So our sort was similar to the other group because, and how it was different. We sorted by blank, but they sorted by blank. So you could allow your students to use these sentence frames to talk about the similarities and differences as well. So when you think about just this last activity alone, there are multiple different opportunities for your students to use academic discourse here. And it doesn't take that long to accomplish it. But do think about what your students already know and what misconceptions might exist. So based on how they sort, that would help you understand, how much do they really know about fractions? So, or how much do they really understand about your other concepts that you've presented? So it could be eye-opening for you depending on at what point in time you conduct an open sort such as this. Okay, we are running a bit short of time. If you have an opportunity, you can look at this open sort Padlet link, and it's in the same Padlet that we've been using. Use the bottom scroll bar to scroll all the way over, and the open sort is off to the very end. So you could see how some teachers have said that they could utilize this in their instruction by doing, for example, sorting by parts of speech, by stems. I like this by feelings. So these are some ways that you could utilize it, and I'm sure that you have other ideas as well. If you do have any questions, feel free to put those in the question box. The recording will be available on the website where you clicked to link to register for this presentation. The recording will be available. The slides will also be available there yet again. You can again access the documents that we used today by going to the bit.ly that's in the top right corner. And do remember that the handout is available for you to register for different FADS presentations and other presentations that the L support team is sponsoring. I'm sorry, DPI is sponsoring, but L support team is presenting. So please look at that handout. And remember again that once you finish this webinar, you'll be asked to do a survey. And then about 1 hour after this completes, you'll receive an email that contains your certificate for today. So please make sure you check multiple areas for that, like your regular email, your junk email. Look to see if you can find it because it should be there. And it won't be coming directly from me, it will be from a different person. There are a few more FADS activities, webinars that we have coming up. And as I said at the very beginning, the strategies presented in the other FADS webinars are going to be different than the ones that you saw today. So if you do sign up for another FADS session on a different subject, a different content area, you will see different strategies than you saw today. So again, if you have questions for us, our contact information was at the very beginning of this webinar, and thank you all so much for attending. If you do have any further questions, we will stay on for a couple of minutes, but if not, thank you all again for attending today.